Hey guys, what's going on? Before you watch this video, I just want to let you guys know that I'm a traditional metalhead, as in the kind that listens from bands from the 70s, and black metal, death metal, folk metal, guys with beards. I'm not really into the emo scene for a huge amount of reasons. I'm not coming to this review from a standpoint of a rock fan or a CCM fan. In fact, I despise CCM most of the time. This video is by a metalhead for metalheads. It's for people who ponder the heck out of music, overthink it to an insane point. I try to base all of my opinions on unchanging facts that will change no matter what my opinions are. And that's what I'm trying to do with this review. Got a little script over here, which is why I'm looking. Because there are a lot of things to say about this album, a lot. I want to start out talking about the history of the band, and then get into, track by track, talking about the general atmosphere. So, anyway, here we are in 2013, and Christian alternative metal / rock band Skillet has finally released their new album, Rise, and that's good for a lot of fans because they released a new album since 2009's Awake. I have a lot to say about this album, good and bad. However, at the end of the day, I think that the album stands fairly strong. I want to dig into every tiny detail in a search for knowledge about this album, and find the great parts and the horrible parts, because you can't have a flawless album. There are good parts to albums and there are negative parts. There's always something you can improve. It's like the sword. You can never truly master the sword. I want to talk a little bit about the history of the band and how, that plays a really big role in this album, because it does. A band's history always plays a role in the album. They've always been a band with a diverse history of musical composition, whilst the entire time gravitating around the heavier, rebellious metal scene. They kind of gravitate and make music kind of like what's popular at the time amongst the heavier scene of music. They seem to change with the time period of heavier music and produce the kind of stuff that was popular at the time, of the production of a particular album at any given time. Their 1996 self-titled debut album was much influenced by Nirvana and the grunge scene, and that kind of music was very, very popular around that time. And they did a very, very good job with it. They stuck around the general grunge scene with a Christian influence whilst drifting into their own realm. Their next couple of albums from 98 to 2001 changed to a more electronic rock / alternative metal feel, and such music had a larger influence in the scene at that time. Not necessarily a huge one, but it was still bigger. It was an interesting and diverse time in rock history and in their discography in general. 2003's Collide was a very, very different album. Collide seemed to be a very new metal influenced album, which would make sense because bands such as Slipknot and System of a Down, who essentially crafted and influenced the metal scene, in the early 2000s and I guess kind of early 1990s, they were getting pretty popular. And John Cooper himself has said, like in interviews and stuff like that he was influenced by Metallica, Motley Crue, and other bands that were popular in the time. And Collide is a pretty good album and pretty addicting as well, because I want to listen to a bunch of all the songs at once, and it's kind of weird because I can't. And it's really, really addicting. It has places where the riffs take a boring and uncreative, simplistic turn, but such moments are few and far between. It's just a couple kind of near the end of the album, but whatever. So Collide started getting them some recognition amongst the metal scene as well as kind of the mainstream Christian scene. Kind of, still pretty heavy, but they had this recognition. Once they had this recognition, they decided to go to more of a modern rock sound while still crafting a masterpiece, and this masterpiece was 2006's Comatose. And Comatose was a fantastic combination of alternative metal with some moments of traditional Christian music, I guess, with moments of symphonic metal. If you think about it, think about symphonic metal bands, some of the bigger ones, they kind of like that with the violin. So it was all around a interesting combination of rock and alternative metal. Comatose sold very well and boosted them to a point of mainstream popularity where they had a higher, I guess, mainstream spotlight, a higher platform for people to reach people. Comatose put the mainstream spotlight on them to make a new album, kind of spotlight pressure. And unfortunately, they seem to have broken under the pressure. Throughout their history, they were influenced by a lot of the more popular heavy bands of the time, instead of making a carbon copy of the rocky stuff, which a lot of the bands in the modern rock scene tend to do nowadays. They were inspired, took the mainstream rock, and played their own style of it. Once again, like drifting into their own realm and doing a very, fantastic blend of, I guess, different kinds of composition in their regards of music. Then Awake came out in 2009, and quite predictably, it sold well since the mainstream spotlight was on them. Songs like Monster and Hero reached high points on the charts, especially Monster, like way up there. And it was praised by many people, obviously, because it was popular. Awake had a crucial flaw that didn't necessarily make it a bad album, but definitely took away from it, I think. Skillet took the mainstream stuff at the time, but they didn't really drift into their own realm. They knew that the spotlight was on them, and the people who had the spotlight once would have the spotlight for a long time without having to work any harder to reach a hard level. Cough, cough, JV, cough, cough. No, I'm just kidding. I don't like his stuff, but whatever. They simply conform to the mainstream, pattern music rather than expanding it a great deal. And I feel like there are a lot of bands that do that. They, get the spotlight and then they just kind of screw up. I mean, Metallica arguably did some very similar things in their history. There are painfully generic power ballads and uninspiring riffs on Awake. However, Awake does harbor some great moments. Monster, their most popular song, has probably one of the largest flaws on the album. It sounds extremely close to Animal I Have Become by 3 Days Grace, even with a similar lyrical theme in a Christian atmosphere, I guess a Christian version. Not completely the same, but still, it's very, very similar. This mistake was repeated on Rise, this album that we're going to discuss here in a minute, but I'll discuss that later. Monster isn't completely a bad song, as it does have a few good ideas, but the alleged reusage of Animal I Have Become really killed it for some people, especially some longtime fans. I mean, it's not my favorite song. I think they could have done better, but whatever. With Rise, I really, really wasn't sure what to expect, because, when most bands fall into, like, this slump of, I guess, mainstream generic conformity, they never really come back, because Metallica has made a partial comeback with some of their music, but I doubt they'll ever produce music which was as good as their old content. I mean, it doesn't even have to be pure thrash metal, it can be something different. But still, it's not good when bands do that. And the first single off this album was Sick of It, which symbolizes when people are sick of sin and evil in the world. And needless to say, I really wasn't impressed, and I was hoping the rest of the album wouldn't be the same, and my hopes were actually fulfilled and confirmed, because it wasn't. It was actually very good, I think. So a couple months ago, I did a review of Sick of It. My problem with Sick of It was that it sounded like they were trying to combine a bunch of their albums together in a half-hearted way because it's what their fans wanted to hear, and they knew their fans wouldn't have discretion regarding the content failing in that manner. It was simplistic in a lazy way, highly uncomplicated, not intellectually challenging, and included generic mainstream conformity. I mean, that doesn't take creativity to come up with. I know there's some octave alternations, but that's not unique at all. So I listened to the song for about 8 hours total, on different occasions to see what vibes I got out of it. That's definitely what it felt like. It felt like a song for simple-minded individuals that didn't demand abundant amounts of content quality. Nowadays, people don't. Back then, a long time ago, people demanded abundant amounts of content quality. And, I was wrong about the initial song, because songs on an album paint a very, very different picture than single songs alone. Album flow is a very important playing factor as to how songs feel, and without album flow, the song really sucked, to put it plainly. In the album flow, Sick of It was simply a song to move things along and not to leave you hanging, not a song to be focused on or to consider it as a high point of the album, just, nothing to see here. About the song, the album definitely feels like it has a little gap that isn't really relevant, but still leaves you with like a nagging feeling, I guess. If you were to say, go right from Rise to Good to Be Alive, think about it. With discussion of album flow, I'll get into the discussion of Rise itself. because it's kind of difficult to make a judgment about them if the band's history isn't thought about, so that's just why I was kind of throwing it out there. There isn't a lot to compare and contrast with if you don't talk about the band's history. I think the entire album is actually pretty great, so. So Rise seems to be very, very influenced by the extreme degree of youth struggles in America today. Because in today's American society, the youth is struggling with sin and depression a lot more than they have in the past. I mean, don't get me wrong, struggling has always existed, but the notability, especially amongst the youth, has increased a lot compared to, say, 60 years ago. Skillet realized that fact, and they knew that many young people were fans of their music, and they decided to use Rise as, I guess, a platform to reach out to them. And this fact plays a huge role in the actual fact-based content quality of the album. So the album starts out with the title track, Rise. The riff of Rise seems to say, here we are, once again, get ready for a roller coaster ride. I should turn that into a lyric. The song propels you down the tracks of a, I guess, imaginary roller coaster as if you're actually riding one in an amusement park, as a preparation to get you excited for the rest of the amusement park. The song itself talks about struggles that are in the world amongst everyone, I mean, not just the youth. The one flaw of the song is that it uses a riff for the rhythm guitar which has been overused to the point that it's annoying. The riff is like that of Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple, and basically the riff is, you start off with the first note of a minor arpeggio, then play the second note of a minor arpeggio, and then go one half step above the third note of the minor arpeggio, and then just go to the third note. Songs such as Ode to the Sun by Islander, IDGAF by Breathe California, and a few others I really can't think of right now for some reason, have used this riff. It's annoying and overused and indicates a lack of creativity and simple-minded improvisation. Something like that. Improvising. Whatever. In my opinion, that's really the only negative thing about the song. It's kind of simple. I mean, nothing wrong with a little bit of simplicity, but, I think it can improve some. There isn't much to say about Sick of It. Sick of It is a simplistic, nothing-to-see-here song to move things along. It isn't a filler song, but it does fill a necessary gap to prevent the listener from feeling like there's a gap where there should not be. Once again, not to leave you hanging. Good to Be Alive adds encouragement to the listener after dealing with issues in life with the first two tracks. It's a song to chill out to and has some simplistic aspects, but the simplism is not done in a lazy way or crappy way. It talks about how life can be difficult, but ultimately the message of the title, the message behind the title of the song, Good to Be Alive, tongue-tied, it shines through. So Good to Be Alive fades out, and then the intro to Not Gonna Die begins. It's actually on the Good to Be Alive track. I don't know why, but whatever, I can still listen to it. So Jen Ledger is singing with an interesting effect on her voice to make her look like sound like a child, and the child sounds like she's rebuking death. Then a bunch of orchestral voices come in with this epic harmony driving the album and the song forward. I was sitting there listening to the song, and my jaw was like dropping. I was just listening to it on Spotify at the time to see if I actually wanted to buy the album, and I started crapping bricks because that was so cool. Because the minor quiet drums going along with the orchestra in the intro are actually playing specific notes rather than just being drums, which adds a very, very interesting tone if you pay attention to them. So the intro to Not Gonna Die fades into the actual song. You're blasted with a very, very epic harmony of fantastic violin and cello. The violin is the primary instrument in many places, with the guitar supporting it, rather than the other way around. The song is an encouragement and a war cry against evils of the world. This is my favorite song on the album because it is a combination of all the great elements on the album. It's got a bit of heaviness, melodic sounds, despair, encouragement, and it's just a great combo of elements, musical elements. And then you're left to endure the circus for Psycho. See, I just kind of screwed that up. The message of the song is rather unclear and obscure. I don't know, some people may be able to figure it out, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the message is. The song probably drifts farther into the heavy realm with an extreme amount of intensity than the rest of the album. It's a strong, loud piece of music with a screw-you feel to it, basically. Overall, an interesting song, and the riffing itself was kind of simplistic and uncreative in parts and could have been improved. That's the only negative thing about the song, in my opinion. The song then fades into American Noise, which is another power ballad. The song is a message to the confused youth to stop hiding in fear, get out there, use their voice, and do something productive. The song has a great message with some simple but still interesting piano ideas. And then what happens next? Well, it doesn't take such a good turn. The song Madness in Me starts playing. Madness in Me is by far the most flawed and boring song on the album. It is a piece of filler music and interrupts the album flow. By the standard logic of metal and rock album flow, the flow should go straight from the ending of American Noise to the intro of Salvation, but it doesn't. Madness in Me's riff is obviously another carbon copy of Animal I Have Become by 3 Days of Grace, a flaw which carried over for Awake, because they've totally never done that before, ever, with Monster. They carried it over for the second time, and it sucks. The chorus is relatively interesting and almost redeems the song, but the song should have been trashed or rewritten the minute it started resembling Animal I've Become. I don't really think, objectively, Animal I've Become is that great of a song in the first place. It's kind of cliched, but it kind of kills the song when you frickin' carbon copy crap. So the intro of Salvation begins, unfortunately deprived of the position it deserved after American Noise. Salvation is a great song about trusting in God, and Jen Leder is singing quite a bit on this track. She's a pretty good vocalist, and her vocal style is very unique and interesting, and the band made a very good choice to choose her as a new drummer after Lori Peters left in 2008. I think that's who it was. Overall, a very strong song with an interesting combination of ideas. So Salvation ends, and then Fire and Fury begins. Fire and Fury is essentially a cool down from the more intense atmosphere that Salvation created. The song is about feeling a burning desire for Jesus and feeling God's love. From a musical standpoint, the song has a slight flaw in it. Many bands, whilst having diversity in a single song, write the music in such a way that each part of the song equally reflects every other part of the song. If you heard the chorus of Fire and Fury and then heard the verse, they would sound like two different songs completely. It kind of went in the piano thing. I would not have expected the chorus at all. The verse sounds like a generic CCM song, kind of, but I was actually fairly pleasantly surprised. I'm screwing my words today. Surprised with the chorus. The chorus, let's put it this way, you would feel like you're floating in a vat full of passion and love if those two things had liquid forms, of course. To summarize the song, it has mostly strong points, but it does have weak points. The verses aren't necessarily bad, they don't fit quite as well as a different kind of verse would. So the album takes an interesting and unexpected turn with the next track, called My Religion. It starts playing and takes you back a couple of years to whenever they were putting out more grungy rock stuff. It's another song to chill out to, but this time more so. It's an interesting use of arpeggios, and it's definitely a groovy song. For every album Skillet has ever had, they've had one song in there that was drastically different from the rest of the songs, and perhaps difficult to compare to many other songs, period. Looking for Angels was Comatose's unique song, and Lucy was Awake's unique song. Or you could consider Would It Matter, the unique song, but that's, a bonus track from Awake. I won't get into the bonus tracks of Awake. My Religion is a unique song on this album, and the message of the song is good too. It's simply stating that we need nothing more than Jesus to be completely and utterly fulfilled, which it's been said a lot, but it's still a good thing to realize. From there, the album tones down for a bit and takes a very, very different turn. At this point, the album has dealt with many negative things, and the rest serves, I guess, as a message of encouragement. The rest of the album, that is. Hard to Find starts playing. It's kind of filler-esque and could be improved, but the message... So I ran out of SD space. Anyway... The song is kind of filler and asking could be improved, but the message, faith is hard to find, it shines through the dark, essentially. So the last song in the Standard Edition album, What I Believe, starts playing abruptly to finish off the album. The composition is very good and well thought out, and the vocal combination of John Cooper and Jen Leder's vocals, as well as the general idea of the song, was very well done. The violin and cello lead many parts of the song and also create a wonderful atmosphere. The deluxe edition of the album includes a couple more songs. At this point, Skillet needed a way to further the album after what sounded like a finale for those who bought the Standard Edition album. They somewhat succeeded and somewhat failed. Battle Cry begins to play. The beginning of Battle Cry does not impress me at all because it starts off with a harp that is so incredibly synthetic and so obviously electronic, it was auditorily excruciating. The rest of the song was okay, and the lyrics kind of re-emphasized previous statements made on the album. It's mostly a filler song. And Everything Goes Black is kind of a nice song, but still highly filler song. It consists of the same kind of encouragement as Battle Cry and many other songs on the album. It almost seems like a more toned-down version of Battle Cry in some places, I think, with more cello stuff and violin stuff. And Freak Show is the final song on the album, period. And the past couple songs prior to Freak Show felt a bit like they're filling a gap which isn't even there, which is taking the concept of filler way too far. And the thing is, Skillet is an intelligent group of individuals fully capable of writing and playing albums that don't have any filler on them. Any. Why they fail to do so in places beyond, what was I trying to say? Why they fail in places on the album is beyond me, since 2 out of 3 of the bonus tracks take on a filler form. I thought bonus tracks were extra authentic tracks for you to enjoy. They're like extra tracks that you pay more to get that actually have some kind of substance. I don't know. Anyway, Freak Show definitely rewinds back to 2001 whenever they were making metal and rock with very electronic elements, while still combining it with more of a modern at the time feel. Of course, in metal. Derp. The song itself is very catchy and very groovy, and it's about how Christians are considered freaks by some people and how we should not care and just move on. Which is good. The song itself could be applied to many situations where a person is considered a little odd. And think about how many times you've been bullied for actually using your brain and being unique. The song itself is a huge encouragement to anyone who's different, and the speed of the song drives the message forward. The ending of the song is a techno outro which fully ends the album and brings it to a halt. A second ending. The album is very interesting to talk about. There are many strong points, weak points, different aspects, things the band could have been doing, their intentions, their thought pattern of the music, lyrics, etc. A lot of things to think about. This album is definitely food for thought. The album itself is very intellectually challenging to discuss and find the truth about, in contrast to some of their past releases. In the end, it's difficult to give a rating on this album. It's got a lot of flawed simplicities and some uncreative riffs in there. I mean, it does. Sometimes it blends simplicity with creativity, which could potentially save many parts of the album, though. It's difficult to know in the end whether it's great, okay, or just sucks. I mean, all I know is that I like it, and since 95% of my music taste is based exclusively on fact-based quality about the music, whether my opinion changes or not, there must be a reason that I like this album. Maybe it's in that 5%, but I really don't think so. I mean, what about objectively? I mean, in my opinion, this album would probably be a 7, but what about objectively? It could go down quite a bit from the negative points, or it could be over-exaggerated, maybe even go up. I'll leave the facts to you, the listener. So, I mean, that's really all I have to say about this album. And I do like this album. I'm going to be seeing these guys with Carnival of Madness in a couple weeks. And it's going to be a lot of fun, with my dad, because my dad really likes them too. I'm probably going to take the CD and play it, so, as we ride down there. But I very much enjoyed this album. You might not, If you don't like the album, don't buy it, don't listen to it. If you like the album a lot, make sure you buy the album, make sure you buy the t-shirts, make sure you go to the concerts. That's what I'm doing, so anyway, have a good time. This is for metal, rock, whatever. Peace, cross, I don't know. I'm just kind of screwing around at this point, but anyway, thank you for watching and have a great day.